Hello, beautiful light-filled souls. My name is Trisha Barker, and I'm so excited to be here with Derrick Quinn and Andrea Storms. They have a wonderful website called Denon Healing, and they also talk about John of God and the experiences of healing in Brazil, which is so amazing. So I'm excited to talk with them more about how they met and healing. I also do want to remind everyone that I have some workshops, so also check in the show notes for my writing workshops. But welcome, and good to see you both.
Thank you.
Hi,
Nice to
Trisha.
see you.
Yeah, so my first question to you is, how did you both decide that healing was your path? So if you could give me a little background about, you came together as a couple, and then how did healing become such a big part of your life?
I think a good place to start would actually be with a higher principle that could put things into order a little bit. And it might seem like kind of a silly reference, but it's a really, really good one. In the movie Forrest Gump, of course, you see the feather blowing in the wind all throughout the movie. And it's only later when Forrest is standing at Jenny's grave that he says, I think I kind of get it, reality. Because Forrest, he's a simple man. he's not stupid. He's got some depth to him. And he said, I think we're kind of blown around in the wind, all accidental like. And essentially what he said is, but I think we also have a little say in the matter. I think we can also influence things in the direction of our choosing. And what we've learned along our path is that if you get that concept, because what people do is they tend to want to find something to latch onto. So Democrat, Republican, chocolate, vanilla, and they say, okay, this is the way for sure. It's veganism, I know it. And then after a little while, after that positionality gets exhausted, you find a lot of people, they almost have no choice but to go to the extreme opposite for a while. Now, nothing's wrong with either one. It's just, it's healthy to realize that causation is happening. You are consciously creating your reality through your thoughts, your intentions, and your feelings about those intentions. But at the same time, so you're creating your reality, but at the same time, you're being drawn into a reality that is already very glorious and somewhat predestined for you. So we all do have a destiny, but we're also shaping it at the same time. So when you bring those concepts together, you have a sort of trifold, a sort of triality consciousness that begins to emerge. And oh, if we only would have learned that sooner, we would have saved so much time.
I love what you're saying about a lot of people get very confused about manifestation, and so versus soul plan, and then what we actually have control over. So would you say that our healing, sometimes a sickness, is part of our destiny, and other times it can be manipulated to some degree or healed to some degree? Is that part of what you're talking about?
Yeah, and that's a really well said discernment that you just made. The further that you go on this path, that type of discernment becomes absolutely necessary to be able to look at something and say, is this part of divine will for me? And it can be discerned through feeling. It can be discerned through kinesiology. You can use a pendulum. There are all kinds of means you can use to discerning truth. But as you just mentioned, I believe you said it this way, almost a more important question is, what is not God? What is the absence of love? And where is that at play in my life? Because that is nothing but destructive and counterbalancing. So I think the most important question is, and we are faced with this, and anyone on this path will be faced with this, what's blocking me? And where does it come from? And what is its nature? And essentially, how can I avoid it at all cost? And if you can, which you can, it only requires knowledge, you'll soar. But one of the tricks that everyone's going to learn sooner or later on this path, and a huge time saver, as we were just mentioning, is to avoid the temptation of becoming positionalized. I love chocolate milk, ooh, but I hate vanilla. oh, I'm such a Democrat, but I hate those Republicans. That's the ego saying, I want to have the power of God, but I don't want to love all of humanity equally at the same time. And love is a requirement to go all the way.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question or get totally lost?
No. It's beautiful. It is a beautiful answer, and that love is what brings the healing, I think is what I'm hearing. And for greater evolution, we are going to have to integrate opposites and to find commonalities, both, in this country and ourselves around the world, like that is a greater level of awakening. And it's an interesting a place to begin. I'm curious about how you found John of God, both of you together, and how this kind of opened you up in certain ways in your life.
My family went to see Zhao about maybe 14 or 15 years ago at this point. We went with a group of friends. Do you remember, did my father go to Brazil before that or after that? Maybe even 16 years.
I'm not sure.
I think it was after. And anyway, our family and friends, and obviously long before I met Andrea, we just had a great experience. And Zhao, John of God, was in Rhinebeck, New York, at the Omega Institute. That's the first place we saw him. And we all just had such powerful healing experiences beyond what we thought was possible. We were all in the spiritual community at that point, but I don't think any of us really realized how capable of healing we were as human beings, and we had never seen anything like Zhao before. So we all had profound experiences. If I'm getting the timeline correct, then I believe my father went to Brazil to see him after our first meeting. And we would see him pretty much every year, maybe 2 or 3 years. And it was during that time, it was during, I think, my second or third time seeing him in Rhinebeck, New York. I was actually working there at the time. Zhao called me out in Portuguese, and this was so powerful for a 17-year-old to hear. I really needed to hear what he had to tell me. And he essentially said, hey, kid, you're a medium. We're all mediums. We're all training to be a medium, so there's really no specialness in it. But for a 17-year-old kid, you really need that nudge sometimes. And it just, his encouragement that day, it really opened me up to being comfortable communicating with spirit. And I spent many hours that day just crying because I finally allowed myself to connect to that world that was attempting to contact me for so long. So yeah, we've been using the John of God crystal light bed. My father brought one back from Brazil. And then when Andrea and I met, my father had already been doing that work for some time, and he brought us into it. So it's been a huge part of our foundation.
That must have been really amazing to have his support, your father's support on the journey, and for both of you as a couple.
Super, big time.
Yeah, so how did that unfold for you? Like your meeting and
so we met, and when we met, we were immediately connected. Once we actually saw each other, we were immediately connected, and for a week's time, we were in the same location. And so for that entire week's time, we were inseparable. And kind of...
And our families, just the sheer power of us finally connecting, because we had both been aware of one another for at least quite a few years prior to that. Spontaneous miracles began happening with the healing of our family. So it was quite a powerful explosion.
Yeah.
And everyone was affected deeply.
And that was kind of the awareness slip. So we met, our energies exchanged, collided, assisted one another really in just the transition and transformation that we were kind of undergoing individually. And then we met each other and we realized, hey, we're assisting one another, and this kind of can be really wonderful. And then we began to witness things that were happening in our families that seemingly someone would say is just a coincidence. But as we've been saying, when you tune in and you become more aware of the truth of reality, the lens through which you see the world and the lens through which you comprehend the world and what is transpiring around you changes.
How
And so
beautiful.
you realize the impact of love. You realize the impact of sacredness and divine witness and yeah. So fast forward, we spent a week together and then many months separate. And then after maybe about 4 months, we reunited again. And we reunited in Pennsylvania at Derrick's parents' home. So yeah, that's kind of, that opportunity kind of served as an incubator, being at his childhood home, and then his parents' support allowed for this incubation process that
we all need support if we're going to embark on a journey like this. We really need each other. Support is crucial.
Yeah, not everybody has that. So what was that like, that kind of incubation?
I personally had been craving that for so long. I have a wonderful, loving family, deeply. But there was something that I could taste that I needed. And so arriving, with Derrick and at his family, and I just melted. My heart melted, and a lot of, actually, we were there a total of about 4.5 years in his parents' home. Probably for the first year, I was just like this sobby, melty blob, in the house.
Bring it back to Forrest Gump again, but look at Jenny in the world all that time. She just had to sleep for a while. We just rested. Yeah. People need a lot more sleep than they might think. It's a lot being in the world for anyone.
Yes.
And it is sad when we don't have support. We really need our tribes. We really need our people.
Oh, I've been thinking about that so much. Like, the deepest longings in my heart are community, nature, and healing. Like, that is what I feel we collectively need. It's not more things, it's really support. And there was this beautiful video of this dog that came out of surgery, and it had this cut on its neck from where it had been, operated on. And it was just holding its owner with its paws, and they were just holding each other. And I was like, why don't we do that for one another? Why don't we just love one another when we've been through trauma and surgery and pain and breakup and loss? Why don't we just come together? And this has been in my heart for a long time. Community is so important. I don't know if you feel that.
Video. I have seen that. It's very beautiful. And I also I read an article where if a young person in a tribal community is misbehaving, they don't punish that person. They put them in a circle and essentially love them to death and say,
they remind
you're loved
of who they are. Mm-hmm. Because they know that at some point they forgot. Something happened that made them forget of their connection to the community and to themselves.
Yes, that rehabilitation of both younger people and older people will probably come through love and nature and that remembering of who they are. And that's so different from punishment, that mindset. But if we could start incorporating that, then I think,
Isn't it?
What's that?
I said, isn't that sort of a great collective fear that we all have, the fear of punishment? It's such an invasion to our innocence, just sitting there at the table, happy little innocent child, and kind of having to keep an eye out for punishment. It's an unsettling reality. Yeah. I hope that made sense. Did that make sense?
It did make sense. Yeah. It does, that it comes out of nowhere. Instead of being taught how to be loving and how to heal wounds, it's this punishing force to shut someone down, to either shut a kid down or shut a person down, instead of, hey, why are you acting from this place? How can we fix that? How can we heal that?
Well said.
Yeah, wonderful. So as you learned more about healing in that time, how did it evolve for you that you would eventually do the work that you're doing now?
When we got together, I had been having premonitions for some time that we would have to utilize, that this person that I felt I was destined to meet, I've been having premonitions that we would have to utilize a superior yogic technique or method of some kind. It was coming to me as a form of spiritual guidance. Fortunately, ask and you shall receive, knock and the door will be open to you. I received what that technique would be. However, I didn't receive it through the Yoga Sutras or the Bhagavad Gita or some sort of ancient yogic text I thought I would receive it from. I received it from a spiritual teacher named Dr. David Hawkins, Power versus Force. I was first introduced to him in 2006 through Wayne Dyer, who spoke a lot of him when he was into the Tao Te Ching. Wayne Dyer, great book. So essentially the technique, the technique that we used for those 4 years and then probably about 6 years total, I believe it's pronounced Isvaradhana, Pranadhana, or it's some sort of Sanskrit term, but essentially it means to have the humility and the courage to surrender to God at great depth. And the idea is that if one is willing to surrender everything, our perception about right or wrong, and essentially this is how AA works, this is how, and prior to AA, there was no cure for alcoholism. If you were an alcoholic, you were going to die. That was an accepted reality. There was no cure for it. Turns out what actually heals you in AA or any sort of great program like this, it's the higher power as you understand it, as you're able to connect to it, which is really just varying degrees of love or God. So the technique we used was to essentially find a way to connect to that energy of God, even a spark of it, and then essentially just become so devoted to that that you thought of nothing else, you did nothing else. And mind you, it's very difficult to do this and be in the world at the same time. So we're very grateful that we had a safe haven to do this at. It really didn't take long because we were both so ready. And the thing is, your average person is not going to be ready to do something like this until they've experienced enough pain first, unfortunately. It usually requires one becoming so fed up with the way things have been that you say, you know, forget it. I'm going all in on this. And we did. And when the power of, you know, two or more gather in thy name, especially a male and female counterpart, that's a very sacred process. And as I've been mentioning, we're all going to be going through some sort of process like this in one fashion or another. What we did to arrive at the place that we are now at is not unique. It is very much a standard spiritual path. The style in which you walk it, how you navigate the terrain, that's all up to your personal preference and style. But we did a very cookie cutter, standard, go from A to B type path. And really, it's not that mysterious at all, because when you get there and you learn about it and you know about it, you see that it was really just a lack of knowledge. It was just really missing information. Information is light. That is the difference between not being able to find a clear path and being so on a clear path that you can't get off. So in a very short period of time, we moved into some very high spaces. And thank goodness we had guidance. Thank goodness we had knowledge. Thank goodness we had a technique. And thank goodness we had a teacher. But it was great.
Yeah. And the courage and the willingness to continue and to face what would rise up.
Yeah. So as I'm listening to you both, I can't help but hear the near-death experience part, that I learned this on the other side, that God was the greatest healer of everything. That energy of God, that power of God is so powerful. And in the darkest times of my life, and I write and talk openly about trauma, that's been the greatest healer. When I didn't have community, I could still connect to God, and I could still connect to God's love. And if I pulled that in strongly enough, sometimes I could get over something in 5 minutes. Like, it could be really quick. Other times, I'm pulling it in and pulling it in. And come on, every day, come on. And so do you see some people make instant changes because they just connect so fully and they're ready in that moment to heal, and then others who it's a process for them?
Of course. And that's really all that it is. There are many factors, but I found that the people who do best on this path are, how should I say this? The lowest amongst us, you might say, the most humble, those who have been given the least because they're so hungry. They're so very hungry. Or somebody who's been through a lot of pain would really register to be on this path. They would be so ready. But it's usually not until the pain becomes too much that you can't live with it anymore that something like this really becomes appealing. And as you just said, a lot of it comes down to capacity. There's only one consistent factor on this path that we ran into, and that, of course, we still run into every day. It's just we become quite good at it, just like anything you do over time. Obstacles present themselves. At first, it's mostly going to be emotional for people. Trauma from childhood. It's a perfect world we live in, don't get me wrong. Everything is perfect. If everything's of God, then everything has its place. But it's a challenging time as well, and our most basic needs as human beings are not being met, because we are transitioning from a time of great darkness into great light. And it's always, not to sound too cliche, but it's always darkest before the dawn. That's part of the paradoxical unity of the Tao, or God. It's chocolate vanilla twirl, not one or the other. So when you become good at identifying the obstacles, essentially you can learn to impersonalize them and recognize that it doesn't really have anything to do with you. It just convinced you that it's yours, so you hold it in the body. And if you hold something long enough, you kind of make friends with it. I mean, when a lot of this stuff left from me, you do almost kind of miss it a little when it's gone. It's like your friend hung out with you, but something much better opens up to you, and it keeps happening, and you can find yourself in a very glorious state that a lot of people might not think is real or possible, but it is everybody's future reality. I assure you, we're all headed there.
So I have a quick question for both of you, and maybe you can just walk me through this, and it may seem a little bit like of a tangent or out there, but people talk about getting triggered in a moment, either in a relationship or in life, in friendships in the world. How do you heal, or what's advice that you would give to people in a moment when they're deeply triggered by something?
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna have to have the humility to admit that there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. You're powerless to your triggers, and that sounds like the opposite of what you'd want to do. That almost sounds humiliating for a little bit.
Yeah. Like I'm a little kid.
Yeah. And trust me, it brings up the helplessness of the child, because you feel as though there's nothing you can do. And what the pain body does, pain body is an Eckhart Tolle term that somehow in my brain, it grabs hold of you. When that happens, the ego, it's fighting. It is essentially trying to defend itself, trying to defend its own pain, because it's essentially traumatized. This is the case in PTSD. This is the case in any of these horrific traumas. How does one recover from something like PTSD or a horrific trauma? You don't. You'd be lucky if you did. The severity of the pain, of the inhumanity that takes place when these sort of injustices are served is very difficult to come back from. Your best hope is to find somebody who can support you, pour a lot of love into you, and is going to be willing to do that for a long time, because it's not just going to take a doctor's prescription, a mindset which says, oh, well, you'll be better in 2 years. It could take 2 decades. Are you willing to love that person and take them as part of yourself while they may or may not heal for 2 decades? It is infinite patience. So
I'm going to jump in right there because that's part of my book. It took me about 10 years of loving myself after sexual assault. And, the first thing that I saw in other women and in myself was as if my energy had been shot through, as if a cannon had gone right through the center of my body. And I was like, where did all that power go? Oh my God, like I'm that wounded. It felt like a mortal wound. And it took years of helping other people who were in traumatic situations, of an assortment of doctors, an assortment of people. And honestly, I didn't have someone who had the knowledge to walk me through that. So, I had relationships. They tried, in certain ways, and sometimes further traumatized me. And I think a lot of women are in my position. And, then 10 years later, I think I finally got to a place with healing and cranial sacral work and my own meditation and getting off, all medications and focusing on healthy eating and being in nature. But that's kind of a long sentence for someone, 2 decades or 1 decade. And my hope is that there's quicker ways to healing, and that maybe the near-death experience and maybe healing, like you talk about, can put people on a path to quicker healing. Do you think that's possible?
Absolutely. And at this time too, there's more availability for that. The earth itself, the energy in the cosmos that is available, it is supporting that rapid evolution, the rapid change, the rapid letting go.
I think a very important, sometimes if you just hear something, sometimes if you just know a piece of information that you didn't have before, it can change everything. It's like a good coach who tells you, hey, just get out there, you'll do fine. Or like João telling me, now in Brazil, in Abadiânia, Diego, one of the main guys who runs things there, he'll tell you, he's like, look guys, in the orientation, everyone here is a medium of the Casa. So if somebody comes out and says I'm a medium of the Casa, it's not that big of a deal. We're all mediums of the Casa. But when João told me that, hey, you're a medium, when I was 17, that's all a kid needed, just a nudge to send me in the complete right direction.
Yes.
So sometimes that's all people need, just a little nudge or a little bit more information, just a little bit more light. Here's something that I guess I once believed that this was very common information, but I think it's great to hear. We have definitely been in a 10,000 year cycle, at least, maybe 13,000 even. During that time, male energy has been more dominant. Sometimes the tilt of balance goes more to one direction than it goes to another direction. And you can see this clearly manifested in the society. All of the buildings are very phallic. Everyone is very, talky, very upper chakra, which is very male, very erect. And that's very difficult to have to live in, even for, we've seen this, you can really see it anywhere you go. Even for a woman to have to try to compete in that world, she almost has to become somewhat masculine herself. Otherwise, the sensitivity and the gentleness and the vulnerability that the collective male experience, again, it's impersonal, it doesn't have the capacity to honor that at this time. So that's just helpful to know that and again, I don't have ovaries, I don't know, I can only empathize with it. I'm a young white male, this is as privileged as it gets. It's difficult. It's difficult to be in a world where you have to fit into that to some degree to even be taken seriously in business. And we've definitely lost touch with how much gentleness is required in order to come back into balance. So like I said, you want to avoid the temptation to choose chocolate and hate vanilla. But sometimes when the scale is so far to the left and it's been so masculine for so long, sometimes you have to almost positionalize a little bit and say, okay, it has to be more feminine now. And it has to be more feminine for as long as it's going to take. Oh, we're only going to do more feminine for a few years until the problem is handled. No, that's still a male approach. That doesn't work. As long as is required. How long do I have to surrender to my pain and obstacles? What do I have to do? As long as it's required. What if it takes 3 days? Well, granted, you may have to go to work, and as we said, you really would be ideal to have support, but you can do it at work too. It's just, we need tribe, we need community. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah, so here's another question for you working together as a male and female. In a conversation previously, you talked about sleeping in a different position and energy. Could you talk a little bit more about the energy of a relationship and things that you've learned? Because I found it very fascinating.
Could you talk about the meditation aspect of it?
Yeah.
I wanted to mention something that took us a very long time to figure out. In order to heal to the degree that we're talking about, there is an alchemy required for all of us, and that can manifest in a number of ways. Your gut bacteria is sort of like your second brain, and all of the trauma is held in the subconscious, below the surface, in 90% of the iceberg. That's where it's at. Ultimately, there are a number of reasons for any diet you would want to go on to, and we don't recommend becoming too strongly dogmatic about any one point of view. But a ketogenic diet of some kind, the brain, the gut bacteria thrive off of a lot of healthy fats. And we found that it's very difficult to process the amount of emotion that is required to process, sometimes not even for yourself, sometimes it's for the collective, unless there is a very strong, consistent manner of eating where you are getting enough fats essentially to support that digestion. Whether you want to do it as a vegan or whether you want to eat animal products, at this point in our planet, that's one's own personal preference. So that's really the first part of what we're about to say, because the two of these, we've found this over many years of trial and error, and trust us, much suffering and reorientation. The meditation and the diet go together. They work together. And if you can do the meditation with your male or female counterpart, great. But if you don't have a partner, you can do it by yourself. So the diet is key because that allows the electricity to move through the body.
And the body to properly digest the energy.
This is the magnetic component, electromagnetic, please.
Yeah. So the meditation component that we found within our own relationship. I actually don't even recall where this arose, but the specific meditation that we implement within our own selves and that we also recommend to couples has to do with polarity and aligning and recharging one another. So typically on a day we're out in the world, we're interacting with people, and as we're interacting with people, mostly we're interacting with people from the heart and up. Mostly we're interacting with people maybe at their throat, but mostly here. It's the front brain kind of projected forward. We're in our computer screen. we're big-eyed, we're excited, we're greeting the day. And that's often how the day is for most people.
All day.
All day.
Morning, Joe.
Yeah, hi, how's it going? Yeah. Very.
I get it.
Yeah, and it's even what's the word? Not quite punished, but it's if someone is other than that, they're kind of ostracized.
A lot of homeless people are real chill.
You're right. They're sitting on the ground.
Oh, God.
So what we found, like in our own relationship, to better assist ourselves, the continual flow within our dynamic, was having this meditation where you would switch polarity. So if the fingers are the head and the palm is the feet, when we meditate 3 times a day, 3 hours each. That's something strict that we have done at
That doesn't
times.
make us more spiritual, by
No.
the way.
I was going to give you an award, actually.
Yeah. Well, that, you know, when we got together those first 4 years, all we were doing was, you know, we were sequestered. We sequestered ourselves. So we weren't interacting with people. We were interacting with Derrick's parents, but we were in the home. We were meditating. We were contemplating. We were doing deep internal shadow work and all of this. So these meditations came forward during that time. Of the exact influence, I cannot recall at this moment, but we found, okay, so here we have, these are the heads, and these are the feet.
Like batteries.
Like batteries.
Positive and negative ends.
And negative. What we found was that if a couple, even just during sleep, even without entering into a conscious meditation, but even if they could, for a night's sleep or periodically, sleep head to toe, their electromagnetic bond that is already established in their partnership can begin to flow through one another and begin to assist to charge and also kind of drain, in a sense, each other's holes.
Rapidly. It's very fast.
Yeah.
And we've worked with couples in person who will often say, hold this up if you would. They say it's uncomfortable because they're not used to that much current running through their body. That's why we say the diet is a very important part of it for the bacteria in the stomach. That will assist the electromagnetic energy in being able to run through. So if the gut isn't set up correctly, people may find it somewhat uncomfortable. There's so much energy running through the system.
And it is uncomfortable too. I remember the first time we did it, I felt like, well, this isn't what a couple does. You know, a couple, they go to bed and their heads, you know, they're entwined. Like, that's the true status of like
But tell them what that actually
a couple.
does.
Yeah, but all it does is it contributes to
Psychic agitation.
Yeah.
Even in the dream state.
Yeah.
2 positive ends. So over 30 years of marriage, eventually you become a little resentful, and any human being would, because you're constantly butting heads.
Yeah.
Psychically, you're not giving each other the rest that you need. So when you flip, everything that she is as a female supports my male polarity, and vice versa. If you're eating correctly, which is, again, is the oil for the electromagnetic energy to run through, you can wake up feeling refreshed and say, hey, I think I want to talk to you today.
Yeah.
Do you think that
It's such a life hack, really.
do you think that this could help people who perhaps are in a stalemate with each other? Like, maybe it's contributing to the continuing arguing and the continuing, like, I've noticed that, you know, older couples, sometimes they'll sleep in different rooms from one another. They're just done, and so maybe that would actually help in the creation of the bond. What have you seen it do for you on an energetic level?
Some would say it's one of the secrets to immortality.
Nice.
I think, firstly, people generally aren't aware that there is a psychic connection. And people aren't, unless you're beginning to consciously, you know, draw those parts of yourselves. If you're consciously awakening, consciously connecting with those parts of the human capacity. So firstly, people don't even recognize that there could be interference or congestion in the psychic field of a partnership that would hinder or cloud or completely actually make up traumas or stress. So a lot of what we found through our entire process and our relationship is that it's not so much about making us better or more of who we are, but it's becoming aware of the layers or the things that we are not, that we are maybe surrounded by or kind of believe we are or take on. Yeah, so the meditation helps each person individually digest their interaction with the world on a daily basis. So you go out, you're a teacher, you're in a school. A school has so many people going through it. There's definitely a lot of electromagnetic current. There's, Wi-Fi. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of psychic activity that's in that building. And then you go home and you and everyone else were expected to then just jump into the next thing. So your home life, you're connected to your partner, or you're dealing with your children, or even your pets. And we think it's common to just be able to go from one thing to the next without recognizing the need to refresh or to recognize the impact of going out in the world, what that does, what that has to your system. So yeah, the meditations help us individually digest our day's activities, our day's interactions, and then it also helps us to recharge and rebalance and get back to a place if we were kind of far away from that place of connection between one another. But then it also strengthens that union and that bond.
Nice. And this, I hope, is a nice lead-in, but I would like to hear more about the process that you've developed with working with people, because I think that's very lovely, the energies that might manifest for someone in a healing. Do you ever see their ancestors there to support them? I'm imagining that you do, because our ancestors, I think, are tied. I felt mine tied to me in times of great need.
Yeah, before we began working together, fortunately, my father had already established work with the crystal healing light bed. So he was very kind to allow us to facilitate a lot of that. So now we were in a very fortunate position, Andrea and I, because when we began our period of hermitage, it was a temporary absence from the world to some degree. My father had been preparing for it for some time. He's quite a premonizer himself. He had some premonitions of a time when we would all be together, whether he consciously knows it or not. He was definitely playing the father role and providing resources and support. So when we were not involved in our process of constant surrender, we had the John of God crystal light bed to go facilitate healing for others, mostly in the Washington, D.C. area. So during our time of retreat, we saw thousands of people. And the only consistency that we ever had, so how can you really call it a retreat if you saw thousands of people? Like I said, it was a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but most importantly, we weren't so in the world that it was an impossibility to continue our inner work. So out of seeing thousands of people, the only consistency that remained is that there is very little consistency in the line of work that we do. We can set up a time that's consistent. We know we're probably going to talk about A, B, and C. We probably know that it's going to be a couple, a family, or an individual. But that's about it. Everything else was very much, to be honest, it's an incredibly unnerving process, because you cannot really rely on what happened last time. It changes every day. And for that matter, some would call this, it's an esoteric term, a flame of wisdom. It's a flame that burns out of your heart. Well, the colors of that flame change every day. The way in which you go about things every day for all human beings, not just people who are consciously on a spiritual path, it changes every day. And if we're willing to go with that change and find anchor here, point to yourself, that's you. So to find identity here and to be comfortable with the inconsistency in our work, it's the only way we've been able to have any consistency in our work. So sometimes the ancestors do come through. A lot of the times our healing work that we do is facilitated, honestly, probably 80% through knowledge alone. Knowledge is light, and knowledge is incredibly powerful. And it's very easy to access good quality knowledge when you purify and tune the instruments, which is what the meditation does. It tunes the instrument, and then the higher power plays the instrument. So it's more of a process with our clients of simply being present and available in our bodies to play whatever song needs to be played through us. And that sounds esoteric and maybe kind of new agey, but it's furthest thing from the truth. We get very clear and direct messages for people. However, the healing, not to be on an ego trip or anything, but it's powerful healing, and it usually unfolds for that person. Even a handful of sessions facilitated by us for the individual, it can unfold over a 9-month period in ways that they're not even fully able to recognize at first until after about 6 or 9 months. They go, hey, you know what? I didn't really see it until now, but and it was a little hard at first because, you have to figure out what's blocking the person, get it out of there. And growth doesn't come without a little bit of stress. Not saying that our sessions are stressful at all. They're very, very relaxing, especially when we use the crystal healing light bed. But essentially everything that you're experiencing with us here and that we've spoken about before, this is pretty much a glimpse, about 70% of what we do. The other percentage really just comes down to physical manipulations, maybe offering them a sheet, some dietary ideas, or how to discern various foods for themselves. It's very individual, but also just cookie cutter enough to have some consistency. Does that make sense?
It does. I like the knowledge as light, and that's something that I think about a lot. My sabbatical proposal and hope is actually to bring more healing to the community colleges through knowledge and college success courses. And maybe it's just a few sentences, maybe it's just one chapter on healing to get younger people interested in faster, quicker healing of childhood trauma and childhood wounds. And if there was one bit of knowledge, or if there was a chapter that you two would like to write for the next generation coming through, what do you think that would be titled? What do you think you would say to people who are 17, 18 coming into that world and trying to make something of themselves, but also heal at the same time?
I'd say get over it. No, it's somewhat true. If you can find the capacity within yourself to impersonalize the drama and the trauma that is unfolding around you, you can find a place of tremendous stability within your heart. And it does require a capacity to be grounded and present while chaos is unfolding around you. So if you're still in the victim mentality of, I don't like this, and there's a great quote from Bringers of the Dawn, which is a book by Barbara Marciniak. What a wonderful book. And it says, victims find victims and victors find victors. But when you're going through the emotional healing process, and especially when we've had something done to us that is unjust and unfair, well, that's just what the dark side kind of wants to put in us. Because if they can bind us with that fear and make us, it's atrocious things have happened, but it still puts that fear in us, and we protect that fear. So certainly get over it is a very uncompassionate and unenlightened way of putting it, but it's true. If you can find your inner victor clear your energy field and stay clear in the presence of your truth and your connection to that truth. As you understand it, you can get through anything. It's so easy, but it's not easy to get to that point because we have to impersonalize a lot of pain. That's where eating good comes in.
Interesting. And Andrea, what would you say?
I know. I guess kind of what's coming forward is more of like a wisdom. Because I was that kid that felt so much and really wanted a lot for myself, and I still do. That never changed. But the only avenue that I really knew was the world as it presented itself to me. I didn't really, coming out of high school, I had like a kind of an idea of things that I enjoyed, things that I was adept at, good at. And I knew that I wanted to be a good person and contribute to the world and be a benefit to the world and to myself. But I didn't know that there was necessarily really any other reality than that which was already laid out in front of me via like society. It was, okay, you go to college, that's your trajectory. Okay, I'm in college. Great, I'm studying this. Okay, I'm good at it, whatever. But I think if there's anything I can sort of say to anyone that's like, high school, early college years, is to kind of stop giving a fuck.
I love it.
What is going on in the world? Like it's not that much there. I know it's so hard because
We're saying the same thing.
Yeah, we are saying that.
I love it.
It's there's so much more than what is presented via media, via even your parents and your family, and it really is up to the person to have the courage to go after that and to,
Yes.
the more available knowledge is, the more available that is, then the easier it's going to be for people. And that's where, our generation and our generations past, that's where evolution comes in, and the evolution of consciousness, because the more that is the consciousness of the world raises, the more natural availability that the younger generations, that knowledge is to them. It's not so much a foreign concept as it is that innate knowing that then is just naturally nurtured because the consciousness of the planet is different, supporting that. So yeah, it really, yeah.
I love it. So don't give a wait. What was it that you said, Derrick? Get over it and don't give a fuck, and then together.
It's so strange because that's not like who I am. Like I care so deeply.
But it's very easy for empathic people to care so much that they don't consider their own feelings about the matter.
Yeah.
Sometimes saying no to things and saying yes to your own needs, regardless of how irreasonable it may sound, is the most enlightened thing you can do. Be loving and kind and compassionate toward all of life at all times without exclusion, but especially be willing to direct that to oneself.
Yes.
And take your time. I think that's what it is. It's time. Like I think most people feel this pressure. There's this pressure to know right away, to know now. There's this pressure to perform now. And that's great. If if you're so certain, yes, follow that, go forward. But take your time. That's
On that note, actually, I think this will be really great here because it'll be an opportunity to present a little bit of science. And I know the mind likes to hear some science sometimes. It makes it more valid. When one is presented with a decision to make, I've certainly witnessed many young people, including myself, who drive themselves absolutely crazy thinking about what to do. Again, we have this dualistic positionalized perception about it. And once they've made a decision, well, they're going to hold to it until it exhausts itself, and then it has to go to the other side. When you point to yourself, you're pointing to your heart. And I've heard many near-death people, including myself, who have I've consciously invoked many near-death experiences, not to make fun of it or to make light of it. It's always a very impressionable and respectable and honorable process to have a near-death experience of any kind. But even after you've traversed through the blackness of the universe, and I don't mean black in a negative connotation at all, I just mean the vastness of space, even in your astral body, at the end of it all, after you've gone as far as the astral, as far as the body will allow you to go, there's only one thing left. When there's no body, no family, no nothing around, that sense of love in your heart is still there, even in the vastness of space. Even after death, it's still there. That's because it's you. So when you have to make a decision, settle down into your heart. The energy field of your heart is 10,000 times more powerful than your decision-making process or even your instinctual behavior. Therefore, love is the answer. When you decide from here, it has the most superior energy, and you don't evolve without love. If you try to evolve, but you say, but I'm not willing to love that, we'll stop right there. Love is the key. Wisdom in the heart is the answer. And if people are willing to go here as a habit, and it's relentless, it's a hard habit to form if you're not used to it, oh, things become so much easier. Things become so much easier. But keep a discerning eye, because you never know when that anti-life energy is going to be around. And it's real. Well, it's not real. It's the absence of love. But it has reality. And it's a mess. And it's a mess to clean up if you don't catch it quick. Here's where the answers are.
So I wanted to add an addendum, but then I want to get back to what you said at the end about the anti-energy, because I think that's important. But I love what you both said to the youth of America, because one of my greatest motivations is I want to give them power, and certainly getting over it and focusing on everything that went right, every bit of energy and enthusiasm and love that they are is the answer to cut through that. And I want them collectively to realize there's such a big generation, and that anything they see in this world does not have to be their reality. So what you were saying too, that just cut through it all and be who you want to be. You have that power, both in this internal way and this outward way. And I'm hopeful for them. And, that is really, my message. It might, I'm hoping that it gets to them. So you echoed something that I want to say in a beautiful way. But I do want to get to that antimatter. So the darkness that some people, feel, or a negative energy, or something that is a fear that has to be removed. As a near-death experiencer, I thought God's love and that light was all that mattered, and it is on some level. Calling that in, certainly that love is the most powerful force. But I have been sideswiped and shocked at times by darkness, or by a force that might be, a manifestation of fear, or someone's focused energy, or something. Could you talk to that topic?
This is a subject I was kind of hoping we wouldn't get into, but I had a feeling that it was going to show up sooner or later. You see, it's a challenging subject to present knowledge to, because for most people, what would be required to counterbalance that presence in their life would require a teacher in person, somebody to work with them in person. And there's nothing that anyone can do to tell somebody that what you need to do to counterbalance the darkness, or whatever you want to call that, and we'll get to a better definition of it soon, is the right thing to do. Because we live in darkness as a society, we're used to it. And a lot of the times we can't discern the wolf in sheep's clothing, because we have not mastered the shapeless and the formless. You see, this antichrist energy, which is what it really is. Christ energy is light, and light of varying degrees up until the highest. And for everything that is in creation, there is also its absence, or its the anti-life energy. But it's not worth getting into. You see, you don't want to call it, you don't want to talk about it, nor do you want to give it a second thought. Yes, it exists, and yes, it has existence. The best thing that anyone could do right now, I would say follow either, depending on your preference, a vegan-based ketogenic diet where you are getting 80% fat, about 20% protein, 5 to 10% carbohydrates. That is a great way to begin, because that darkness lives in our unhealed emotions. And if our gut bacteria is not thriving as it is meant to as human beings, we're going to have a very difficult time processing our own darkness, let alone counterbalancing things outside of ourselves. I would highly recommend, and this does not come from a positionalized place, and I may get some shit for this in the spiritual community, but I would highly recommend some strong fatty animal products like beef or a pig. Cows have 3 stomachs that convert 3rd-dimensional grass into 5th-dimensional flesh. They're very sacred beings. I understand thou shalt not kill. I get it. But there's just a little bit more to it than that at this time. To form a symbiotic relationship with an animal is a very respectable process. To form a symbiotic relationship with the flesh of a pig, I know it might sound childish or silly or maybe too commonsensical to really have any validity. It allows us to become a little bit more okay with the unnatural degree of dirtiness in the world. What about parasites? Oh yes, you better believe there are parasites and worms and all kinds of things. But also look in the earth, there are earthworms. Here's another quote from Barbara Marciniak in her book, Earth. And also for young people, Barbara Marciniak, Bringers of the Dawn, and Earth. Put it on YouTube, listen to it you'll have such a great time. It'll open so many doors. Barbara suggests, or the Pleiadians who are writing through her suggest, that you can actually do a bit of damage shaming these things inside of yourself. She says, who's to say they shouldn't be there? Maybe they're helping you process toxic fumes that come from the vehicles outside, things that are an unnatural part of the environment that if your body were too clean would be absolutely devastating to you. So perhaps they serve a purpose more than we know. And perhaps, I can say this from experience, being vegan for too long, and no offense, I love veganism. I was raw food, vegan, yoga. I love all that. You feel great. And if I was living in the Himalayan mountains or in an environment where it's appropriate to be that psychically clean, I would be a breatharian, you know? I would drink water.
A fruitarian.
Fruitarian. I'd be someone whose insides are very clean. And I would breathe the air and I would be sustained by the light of God. But down here on the surface level, things are dense in the fourth density. At this time, people might find that they need something a little heavier or seemingly, this is from a matter of perspective, more toxic. Therefore, one of the best ways to really come full circle to deal with this presence of anti-life in your life is to do the meditation. If you don't have a partner to flip your batteries with, then what you need to do is get on your iPhone and find true magnetic north, or better yet, you have a compass, do that. Figure out where true magnetic north is. And one time in the morning, lay with your head to the north and meditate from your head to your heart. Just hold your consciousness in the positive aspect of your body. And then once in the evening, switch, put your feet to the north and meditate on the negative aspect. Now, for most of us, that's going to be the hard one. It's going to take time. It's going to even be painful. Because stuff is going to come up. But remember, this doesn't work without substance in the body. Again, if we were living in a more clean environment, and certainly in the future, it'll be very, very possible to live this way. Now, I know I'm all over the place a little bit here, but let me mention one more thing quickly, because I don't mean to take up too much of it. The vegan diet is fantastic for cleansing, for purifying. It will get that stuff out of your body and you will feel great. I only needed 5 hours of sleep when I was on. I was doing headstands, yoga, feeling great all the time. But then after about 5 years, once you're clean, you're like, I think I need something a little bit more. And you're seeing this in the vegan community now. People as a collective are starting to say, I like this, but I think I need to go into a rebuilding phase. I don't know what I need, but I feel guilty now that I'm not on my vegan dogma anymore. I'm confused. So diet and meditation, again, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. If you have a partner, support each other in that way. Those two things alone, if you actually do them, it's fun to talk about it, but you actually have to do it for a while. Then send us an email, then come talk to us, or whomever you choose to go to. Because it's only after you've been experiencing it for a while that we could really go further in that. In the meantime, everyone will be fine. Don't worry about the darkness. Don't worry about that kind of stuff. Just be happy, be kind. It's that simple. It's that's further down the road, that other stuff.
I'm glad you talked about veganism as a cleansing tool, and I have a video about that. I say that I'm 60 to 80% vegan because I like some vegan meals, and there are times when I'll go through a cleansing period. And just for not wanting to gain weight, you know, as you get older, it's wonderful, you know, to focus on that. However, you know, in my youth, when I called myself a full vegan, there were so many times my friends made fun of me because if I drank too much, I ended up with a turkey leg, you know, at some event, or, you know, I'm at the hot dog stand.
And the self comes forward.
Yeah, because the veganism went out the door.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, there's a lot of vegans who are not fully, they binge, you know, and they're not honest about it. And
Yeah.
so that's the body probably telling me like, oh my God, you need some grease, you need some fat, you need some, you know, in that moment.
Oh, by the way, we are 100% vegan. We just eat a lot of meat too.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And so I found balance in my life with food. And I think that's maybe what a lot of people will come to is like, it's better for the planet, better for the environment to eat less meat. You know, I think about hunters and gatherers, and they would probably eat a pig for a month. You know, they'd eat, you know, all of that. And now we just have too much available. So I try not to overeat meat, you know.
But again, it's very important, no, and you're absolutely right. But it's also very important to remember that somebody, when they are in that phase of their life, there's really nothing we can tell them or no degree of getting upset at them that is going to make them see a more balanced point of view. We have to honor them enough to let them have the fullness of that experience so they can even see the appeal. And usually it's going to require then going somewhere else extreme for a while, and then we honor that extreme until they find their own middle ground, which you may eventually find is somewhat similar to the original approach that you were offering. That's the value of having a teacher and somebody that you love, and a teaching that you can be humble toward, because if the teacher tells you, hey, just eat this way, and you really love and trust the teacher, you'll just do it. And you know, but they will hold that space for you to do that. It's very hard to do unless you're enveloped in the womb of a loving tribe. We're parents, we're teachers, we're developing one another. So God, do we need support? Doesn't it always come back down to that? We need more support.
It does. So yeah, we kind of got off and probably could talk on that topic for a long time, but I do want to switch gears, and this will be, I guess, my last question to you both. But yeah, I know time has flown by, but your sacred process with others, what is it that you want to leave people with who might be interested in coming to see you or going to Brazil, or what is it that you would most like to leave people with? What bits of wisdom?
Let me start, and then you just take it through. Yes, we do work with individuals, couples, and families, and we do that via the internet, but also at home. And that's more of an intensive process that takes place over time. That's for people who have already been familiar with our energy for a while. The most immediate thing that people can do if they want to reach out and contact us is go to our schedule section on our website, denonhealing.com. There we are essentially touring. We are in Southwest Florida at the moment. We're going to be traveling to Pennsylvania for a short little tour, and then we'll be back where we'll be settling down for a little bit in Las Vegas, Nevada. So we'll be out there on the West Coast, also California. Danan ceremonies are the John of God ceremonies that we offer. And those are essentially day-long ceremonies where people come in and out of sacred space, putting you underneath the lights. We do some very comfortable physical manipulation on the body to open the pathways, and we guide you through meditation as well as the meditation that we are speaking of. We essentially do a version of that where we are holding you, like the tribe or like the teacher would, in a very supportive bubble where you can go through all sorts of things and essentially get a big chunk out all at once. We kind of call it a life hack, because when you come in for a Danan ceremony, you're going to get a big burst of what you need, and a big burst of what wasn't you to begin with is going to get out of there. So we'll see 10 to 12 people a day during an average Danan ceremony, and that is a little bit more practical for most people. Again, we tour, we travel, and so that is the biggest platform for people to reach out to us. And that's also best because that's going to give you a direct experience of the energy. And once you've had an experience, it's really all downhill from there.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's the probably the greatest desire is having had the experiences that we've had over the last years on our journey, recognizing what we both needed, what worked, and the value of the support system that we had and continue to cultivate within our own selves, and then the relationships that we create with others. That's our desire with Danan. That's our desire with our offerings, is to be able to hold that sacred space for another individual, to see them, to allow them to relinquish their burdens, even just for a moment.
Beautiful. yeah, no, it's so important. It's so important.
Important. And the crystal lights are such a beautiful extension of that for someone to experience the light, and then for us to sit and hold space for that experience. It's just a wonderful opportunity for people, and it's an opportunity that everyone is craving so deeply. They're so hungry for it.
Come get fed.
Yeah.
Yes.
We all are seeking nourishment, spiritual nourishment, emotional nourishment, physical nourishment. And if we can offer that to another individual, that is so deeply nourishing.
Nourishing.
Nurturing. Yeah, nurturing and nourishing. So that's our intention. Our intention is to offer that space, and then to deliver knowledge, to offer knowledge also to assist that individual as they move forward. Because specifically for me, I needed that nourishment, but I needed that knowledge so badly too. It wasn't knowledge that I didn't already know, but it was knowledge that I needed to be reestablished and reaffirmed in my environment, so that I could know and trust the knowledge that is in all of us. And as we clear and as we soften, we can access that within ourselves again.
It's all on the website, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great to hear it from both of you, and so lovely to talk with you both. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. But yes, in the show notes, everyone, you can check out their website, Danan Healing, and my upcoming workshops. I have quite a few with creative writing groups, and also with those who want to connect with their angels on deeper levels. So I'm having a ton of fun in calls helping people access their own mediumship and their own connection with angels. And that's been a beautiful process for me. But thank you all for watching, and may you be blessed.